Hey everyone, we just passed 300 subscribers on YouTube and I figured now was a good time to make a video in which I share why I quit video games, so my story as well as my mission and my vision for this channel and this community. I'm not going to tell you whether or not video games are good or bad, right? I'm not going to cast a value judgment over them. I'm not going to tell you whether or not you should or should not play them. My goal with this video is simply to explain why I chose to stop playing video games and to get you thinking and imagining about what a life beyond video games might look like, as well as what I consider to be the reality of men who play video games and what the opportunity cost is, right? What you're giving up if you choose to continue playing video games. So that at the very least, you are empowered to make the best decision that you can according to what you think your best life looks like. And something else to address, I have some notes here, by the way. First of all, this video is going to sound or listen a lot like a podcast. So if you want to just set it while you're in the car or while you're doing something else, doing chores around the house, that's fine. If you need to put it at 1.5x speed or 2x speed to get through it more quickly, that's also cool. But just bear with me because there are a few points that I'm going to work through. The other thing to address is that, I get a lot of comments in my YouTube shorts from people who think that I'm demonizing video gamers, or I'm trying to shame them or make them feel bad. The reality is that I'm not, my goal with this channel is not to judge anyone, right? It's simply, at the end of the day, like the people who I serve, my audience and my customers are men who play video games. They're the people that I care about the most in everything that I do. And so really the goal of this channel is to just get men who play video games thinking about their lives and how video games truly fit or don't fit into those lives. As someone who used to play games myself, which I'll explain further, I think that within every man who plays video games is a dormant hero, if you will. And my goal is to wake that hero up and remind men who play video games of who they are and what they're capable of, and the kind of life, the kind of extraordinary life that they could be living if they transcended video games. But that being said, even if you have no intention of quitting video games at this point in time, even if you go right back to playing video games after you watch or listen to this video, that's totally fine. At the very least, hear me out and entertain what I'm about to walk you through. Let's see. So probably start with my story and why I chose to quit video games, right? I played video games all of my life from a very young age. I really got into video games when I was 9 and I was introduced to World of Warcraft by my stepdad. And I played World of Warcraft on and off for nearly 15 years. I'm 25 right now. So, every time that I would get really into World of Warcraft, I would always play quite hardcore. It was never really a casual thing because I like to be the best at whatever I do. I like to really go for it, and kind of whenever I really love something, I kind of tunnel vision on it and I want to get the most out of it, right? So every time that I'd immerse myself in World of Warcraft, I would inevitably reach a point where it just became unsustainable. I was about to flunk out of my classes. I was just, stuff wasn't going well. And eventually, I think the last time that I left the game behind, I woke up one morning and I looked in the mirror and I was like severely underweight, super pasty. Not that I'm super tan right now, but I just knew that this needed to stop. This needed to change. I hadn't changed as a person in nearly 2 years. I had kind of just been stagnant playing the game and I had nothing to show for it. So it was this last time where I finally took a step back and thought very deeply about what kept me coming back to the game. Every time that I thought I had quit it and I left it behind for good, I started making progress in my real life, in my health, my wealth, my relationships, right? But I always came back to the game for some reason. And so I started thinking about this and writing about it very intensely. And the question that I asked myself a few questions. Number one, why is it that I can play World of Warcraft for all day, every day, basically for months on end, and have the time of my life, and not, for example, like it felt like I had to escape into World of Warcraft away from my real life, but when I was playing WoW, it didn't feel like I needed to escape from the game. I could just play it relentlessly all the time and have a blast. And So why was that the case? But then when I went to do certain things in my real life, it felt like pulling teeth. I encountered a lot of resistance. It just did not feel the same. I couldn't do it all day, every day for months on end, with the same level of enjoyment or satisfaction. The next question I asked myself was, what if I could approach my life the same way that I approached World of Warcraft? If I could transform it into a game that was so captivating and so meaningful, it had an epic story, it was rewarding, and I felt like playing this game of my life in the same effortless, passionate, loving way that I used to play World of Warcraft all the time. And not just for myself, but also, I considered this from the perspective of the people that I used to play with, because I used to play, again, with hardcore gamers, people that wanted to be the best at everything that they did in the game. They wanted to be the best on the server. They wanted to dominate every aspect of the game. And it was so clear to me, like, thinking about this, that if these people, setting myself aside for a second, if these people really wanted to, they could be like whatever they wanted to be in real life, and they could accomplish anything, because I've seen how sharp they are, how hardworking they are, like how they'll just go to any length to dominate the game. They could be millionaires, they could be, incredible artists, businessmen, like writers. They could do whatever they wanted to, because they'd already shown to themselves and to me that if they're handed a game, they could just crush it. And that's how my community was born. That's how my mission was born. It's called Main Character Men because the analogy that I use is living like an NPC, a non-player character, right? Like one of the mobs or the NPCs running around in the games that you play, versus living like the main character of your own life. Is life just happening to you? Are you at the mercy of forces out of your control, and you're just kind of clinging on for dear life and doing the bare minimum, or doing what you got to do to like get by, and consoling yourself with video games or Netflix or whatever it is when you get home, just that it's not as dreadful and miserable? Or are you living life on your own terms? Are you happening to life as the main character of your own story, as the protagonist of your own game, right? Are you grabbing life by the nuts and living it to its fullest potential, in full awareness of your control and your agency over your own destiny? And so that's the thought experiment that inspired what I do right now. The idea that as a gamer, I can transform my own life into a game of its own, the best game ever created, where I don't feel the need to ever put it down, so to speak, and I want to play it all the time. I think that and this goes into something else that's brought up in some of my YouTube Shorts comments, which is people talking about how they have a happy balance with their real lives and video games, right? Like they have a solid job, they have good friends, etc. Here's the thing. The terrifying thought that I had that made me, quit video games immediately, to the point where, like, right now, when I think of video games, they just naturally disgust me. They don't have any appeal, and I don't want to play them at all, is the idea that I wake up one day, it's my last day on earth, like I'm on my deathbed, and I look over the course of my life, and I'm just overcome with despair and dread and regret, because I know that I wasn't living it, that I didn't live it to its fullest potential, right? That I kind of just stayed in a place of comfort and complacency where, I had a decent job, but it wasn't really something that I cared that much about. And I kind of just went through the motions, 9 to 5, came home, threw the ball to my kid a couple of times, hung out with my wife a bit, and then played video games for the rest of the night. And I did that for 40 or 50 years until I retired and died. And to me, that's a super bleak, empty existence. Because the same way that when I play a game like World of Warcraft, I want to, I'm overcome with a sense of wonder and awe. I want to explore everything. I want to do everything. I genuinely want to be immersed in work that I care about. That's kind of how I view my life as well. And forget the end of your life. Just, I turned 25 this past February, and even the thought of another year alone passing by, let alone another 5 years or 10 years and I wake up and I'm exactly the same person. Yeah, I might be more wealthy, but I haven't grown as an individual at all. I haven't figured out more about myself. I haven't used my time to do things that I truly care about or to work towards creating like a more ideal version of my life. And instead I had sold myself short and settled for less because I was too afraid to make that jump. And, you know, again, going back to my mission with this channel, I'm convinced, and a lot of gamers that have interacted with my content and reached out to me have told me this themselves, that like a lot of men who game feel the same way. I think that the primary emotion, the primary feeling that draws most men towards video games, whether they admit it or not, whether they're aware of it or they're kind of just like, you know, quietly negligent of it in what you might call an ignorant bliss, is, you know, that emotion is despair. It's this feeling of quiet desperation where you know that there's more to life than this, and but you don't know how. You don't know like what to do. You don't know what it is, right? It's scary because it's very much plunging yourself into the unknown, leaving behind the comfort and the safety and the familiar, you know, positive emotions of video games, all the friends that you have there, and kind of venturing out into the darkness in search of something better. That you know that this isn't necessarily it, but I mean, it's a very scary leap of faith to take. The other thing to consider on the notion of happy balance with video games, right, is, you know, like, it really depends on whether or not you aspire for more in real life. Like, do you have financially, romantically, in terms of your health, like spiritually even, are you where you want to be? Are you okay with this? Like, do you crave more? Do you aspire for more? Are you truly living your best life? Like, that's the question that you have to ask yourself and be brutally honest with yourself about. At the end of the day, I think that, you know, a lot of gamers, a lot of men who play video games are very, even if they don't readily admit it, even if they haven't thought about it in a while, even if they're kind of just living their lives like NPCs, right? They're not very in tune with their inner intuition. They're kind of just going through the motions and doing what they got to do and not exposing themselves to any uncomfortable situations that actually demand growth, right? And are challenging. They secretly know that they're capable of much more, and that a much more rewarding life awaits them on the other side of pain and some suffering and some challenge that's inevitable and required in order to further discover who you are and in order to create that ideal reality for yourself. The reason why I do what I do is because I fundamentally believe that even if you don't think so, watching this video, I think that you, if you're a man who plays video games, are capable of much more. And that much more rewarding life does await you. You might not think so, right? Because if you know that a much better life is possible for yourself beyond video games, then the only question is whether or not you think that you're capable of creating it or achieving it. And I think that's where a lot of people veer off the course. Like they feel like life just isn't fair. They're kind of just helpless. They're like a boat cast out at sea, being thrown about by the waves. Like they just got to do what they got to do, and the life is and the world is a cruel, cold place. And I'm here to tell you that that's just not true. That you are capable of much more. And I know this because you've proven it to yourself. Any guy who's played a video game, who has done anything challenging within a video game, right, and has been able to attack that video game in this relentless fashion and express his own innate power in a way that he doesn't he's not able of expressing in his real life, has shown to himself what he is capable of. Let's talk about, and I will also, my final point here is that I really want you to, not just during this video, but beyond this video, like tap into the power of your imagination and think about it. Like, what do you truly dream of? Do you dream of being a millionaire, having 7 figures in your bank account, being an international playboy, getting that mansion, getting that villa, flying on private jets, like, exploring the world? Because there's literally so much to do in life that you couldn't possibly do it in one lifetime. Life truly is the greatest game on earth because there's endless content and it's constantly evolving, right? Even 10 years from now, let alone 50 or 100 years, there are going to be all kinds of new quests, so to speak, all kinds of new things to experience, challenges to overcome, ancient mysteries to explore, like problems at a large scale to tackle and to help other people with. And like, there's a super rich history. There's all kinds of stuff that we don't know about in the world that we might not never ever know about. And there are also certain levels to the game of life, so to speak, that many of us haven't even unlocked yet, and we might not ever unlock if we don't actually go for it, right? There are certain, I want you to think of this in terms of like a James Bond movie, even, where like there are certain adventures in life that you only get to after a certain point, like certain echelons of society, certain levels of intrigue, and just certain experiences that you can't, you have to unlock, so to speak. And so think about that. Like, just genuinely brainstorm and imagine and try to expand your scope of possibility, like the horizon of what you think is possible in life. And then tell me that it's not, and then come back to me and tell me whether or not that's compelling, right? Beyond just much more compelling than just playing a video game in which the story is pre-written, all the instructions are there for you, and you kind of just do that over and over again, hopping from one good game to the next. Let's say that you finish one of your games and you've done everything there is to do. You just log on to do your weekly raids or do your dailies, and like it's low stakes, or rather it's low risk, right? Low stakes, but it's also it's low reward compared to the feeling of aliveness that you could experience if you truly tackled life for all that it was, for all that it is. I want to talk also about why I think men play video games in the first place. So I personally consider the craze around video games, like men playing video games en masse, as a symptom of a much larger problem. And that problem is a crisis of masculinity that the world is currently experiencing right now. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So for all of human history, every society and every culture in human history has had, it's like a subculture of what you might call masculine excellence, right? Oftentimes represented by the mythology of, a given culture, whether it's Thor and Odin in Norse mythology, Zeus in Greek mythology, etc. The Hindu pantheon, like there's always been a culture of masculine excellence that praises certain ideals like courage, valor, mastery, etc. And we've largely lost that in recent history. Like my dad certainly didn't teach me about what it means to be a man, to be, in control of your emotions, to be charging through life, taking what you want, conquering, being the man, right? And living like an arduous life in order to become the best version of yourself, to truly figure out who you are. And so, I mean, in some sense, this notion of masculinity is like ridiculed or demonized nowadays by phrases like toxic masculinity, for example. Men are encouraged to be weak, to be emotional, to be vulnerable, like and to not vie for a life of masculine excellence. I think that what men are subtly, subconsciously craving when they play video games is the heroism and like the journey of self-actualization and fulfillment that they experience while they play video games. You know, it's I call video games spiritual junk food. Another way to consider this is, I mean, I even go so far as to call them fulfillment porn or porn for the soul. And what I mean by that is, absent video games, like, every man has to go through what you might call a hero's journey in his real life, where he ventures forth from the safety of, you know, the life that he's currently living on this mission of self-discovery and transcendence. He crosses a certain threshold, right? He undergoes certain trials and tribulations, and at the end of it, he's better off, and he's like discovered who he really is and transformed himself into, for all intents and purposes, like a man on a purpose, like, you know, living life for all that it's worth. And the nefarious thing about video games, even if you play them casually, even if you play them, you know, a couple hours a day, which, by the way, adds up to, you know, about 900 hours a year, is that unlike a novel or a movie, which is another comment that I get in my shorts, like, video games are just a hobby, they're like reading a novel or watching a movie, right? The difference here is that video games allow you to feel like you are actually accomplishing certain things, like you are actually overcoming certain challenges and growing as an individual, when in reality nothing in your life actually changes. And that's not to totally dismiss the experiences that we have when we play video games. Like I've said, I think that video games, and this is the mistake that a lot of people who try to, you know, help others quit video games make, is that they immediately sweep all those experiences gaming under the rug and they suppress them, or they immediately like try to just demonize them, like, video games bad, forget about this, never think about it again. I think that your experiences gaming are a treasure trove of knowledge about yourself, and just this gold mine of proof to yourself of what you're capable of when you can operate without the same fear of failure, the same limiting beliefs that you express in real life, but that somehow, you know, magically melt away when you play a video game. There's this difference in perception there. And so if we can bridge the gap in perception between video games and real life and express ourselves just as powerfully and as freely as we do when we play our favorite video games, we can be unstoppable. Like, that's the fundamental idea behind what I do. And so the difference between a novel or a movie and playing video games is that if I watch an inspiring movie, for example, like Gladiator or 300 or The Revenant or whatever, like, sure, that might stoke a fire within me to go, you know, pursue masculine excellence in my real life, but it doesn't actually feel like I have accomplished anything or like I am on that journey simply by virtue of watching the movie or reading the novel, right? The difference with video games is that you can jump from video game to video game, or just pour yourself into one video game specifically, like World of Warcraft, and it'll feel like you're simulating the hero's journey in this safe environment full of positive emotions, free of all, like, you know, the things that you'd otherwise have to confront in your real life. It's making you feel like you're self-actualizing and you're discovering yourself and growing stronger as a man, but you're really not. That's why I compare it to porn, because I mean, porn makes you feel like it simulates sex, right? It makes you feel like you're being sexually gratified when you're in fact not, and that does terrible damage to your brain. It makes you complacent, right? In the same way, video games are porn for your soul. They're spiritual junk food. They're fulfillment porn because they make you feel like you're going on that hero's journey, that you're growing as a man without actually doing it. And so even if you're playing video games a couple of hours a day, they're probably robbing you of that hunger, of that fire, of that defiance, that fucking warrior spirit that should rightfully, you know, get you pissed about your current situation and drive you towards achieving more in your real life and creating a better life for yourself. This is, you know, there's a reason why we geek out as gamers over like the heroes in our favorite cinematics when we watch a cinematic like pertaining to our video game, right? Where when we idolize the people like Kratos or Master Chief or Arthas in World of Warcraft, like we're living vicariously through fictional champions and heroes instead of becoming heroes ourselves in our real lives, instead of creating our own real life legends, instead of mythologizing ourselves and stepping into the fullness of our own greatness as men. The video games hijack this. Either they hijack it or they just nullify it completely. The innate warrior spirit that every man has, that fire within you, and that defiance, that fuck you attitude of, like, I'm not settling for this life. I know that I'm capable of so much more, that there's much more to life than this, and I'm gonna fight for it, and I'm gonna take it. I'm not gonna wait for good things to happen to me. I'm gonna make them happen. Like, and I want you to also consider this within a broader context in terms of its consequences. Like, I'm sure that you've all heard that, perhaps you haven't heard it, but there's an adage that goes, a saying that goes, strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times, and hard times create strong men. Right? We are in the good times have already created the weak men, and we're in the part where weak men create hard times. And it's going to either breed a lot of strong men, or a lot of other men are going to fall behind and succumb to the circumstances of those hard times. Most, if not all, of the problems in the world today are the result of weak men, of men who shirk, who disregard their inherent duty to be men, to be strong, to be courageous, to lead, right? Men and fathers are so much more than just fathers to their immediate families. They're fathers and leaders and shepherds. Etymologically, if you look at the root of the word father, like it goes back to shepherd. Like, they're shepherds of other men, of their communities, of their people at large. And it's not just with video games. I mean, it's with alcoholism, escaping into TV, Netflix, like just sloth and leisure for the sake of leisure. Like, the masculine spirit is under attack. I'm not gonna conspiracize here and think about or brainstorm whose fault it is or whether or not this is a deliberate thing. Suffice it to say that this is the current state of the world. We're at a severe loss for men who are conscious of and who fully own their masculine imperative and their duty for masculine excellence, their duty to masculine excellence. If you're a father, if you plan to be a father at some point in your life, I need you to understand that your sons look to you to understand what it means to be a man, like who they should become. And your daughters look to you to understand what to look for in a man, right? Who should they select as the man who, after you is going to protect them and guide them and lead them. So even if you're providing for your children, right? Even if you put a roof over their heads and you feed them, if you're just doing the bare minimum to raise them and you're not actually being the best man and the best father that you could be, don't be surprised if your children take after that and end up the same way, right? If you're living a life of complacency and comfort and escapism, where you're just doing the bare minimum to get by and like playing video games at night so that you don't swerve into oncoming traffic the next day on the way to work because your existence is so fucking miserable, then don't be surprised if your son ends up living an identical life to you. Don't be surprised if your daughter marries a deadbeat or a loser or an addict. Like, the best teacher is a model. It's an example. And you can either be the person, you could be that one man in your lineage, right, who flips the script and starts like a dynasty of strong men and women modeled after yourself, or you could just let the cycle carry on. you got to also understand that like you are the culmination of hundreds, if not thousands of years of ancestors who did what they had to do in order to create a better life for their offspring, for their descendants. Like my grandfather, for example, fled communist Cuba and worked his ass off to carve out like a good existence here in the States. And it's just totally dishonorable for me to take that and squander it and not make the most of my own life. So that's the underlying cause, I think, of why men play video games and why video games are so rampant. Men don't have a place, they're not even taught to want to express their own masculine imperative in their real lives. Like, this is stuff that I had to learn. My dad didn't teach me this. I had to figure out and connect the dots and be like, damn, like maybe this is what I'm missing. When I play World of Warcraft and it's satisfying this longing for a sense of purpose and a mission and something larger than life, a sense of adventure, like a sense of being on that hero's journey, like this is why. The other thing I was going to say is, well, we can probably come back to that. I want to take a step back now and just address what I would consider the reality of video games and their consequences, right? So you might decide that you simply want to continue playing video games. You have a healthy relationship with them, so to speak. They're just like a hobby, whatever. That's your prerogative. But I want you to also consider the fact that this state of the world in which it's like normal or even possible to like go to work, come home, play video games, do that over and over again, like, and have a healthy balance in the first place is not normal. It's unprecedented. And there's no guarantee that the circumstances of the world are going to continue in a way where like that balance is feasible, right? Gas prices are going through the roof. We're on the brink of another economic recession, and like shit is hitting the proverbial fan in the real world. Now, are you going to be prepared as a man to deal with those things if you're, living a comfortable life, playing video games here and there, if you're not doing everything in your power to become the best man that you could be? Something to consider. And the other thing I wanted to raise on this subject is that if you choose to play video games, again, that's your prerogative. However, you got to understand that you're not entitled to anything in life at all. And if you're going to play video games, you have to own the consequences of playing video games, even if it's playing them in a way that you might consider casually, right? If you don't have the money that you want in your bank account, right? If you're still slaving away at a job that you hate, and every time that a millionaire pulls up next to you in a Ferrari with a beautiful woman next to him, if you get pissed and resentful, you have no reason to, because you have the same 24 hours in a day that he has. You know exactly what you're capable of, and you simply decided to use your time differently, right? If you complain about politics, if you complain and cast yourself as this victim of a world that's just inherently unfair, and it's not your fault and all this other crap, like, that's bullshit. You have the same 24 hours in a day that every other man has, so don't be pissed if other people are playing the game of life, so to speak, more relentlessly than you are, right? If you're going to play video games, you do you, but own the consequences and own the reality of your hobby. There are people who are treating life like a game and who aspire for more and doing everything in their power to make it happen. And obviously those people are going to have returns on their real lives that are going to be incredibly different from yours if you're living a comfortable life. If your life is something that you need to escape from instead of something that you can pour yourself into. Don't be surprised if your girlfriend starts to resent you, if your relationships aren't as great, if your marriage becomes sexless and void, if your children resent you later in their lives because they feel like you were absent and you weren't truly being a father. You were just kind of doing the bare minimum, putting a roof over their head and food on the table. Like, but you didn't actually teach them. You weren't active in their lives, right? Don't be surprised if your wife leaves you, or if you get divorced because you're just not paying any attention to her, and like the relationship isn't hot at all. Like, these are things that you have to consider. And you cannot cast yourself as a victim. You cannot, complain that people are just don't understand your hobby, that they're, because like no, you're not entitled to other people bending their lives and their reactions to suit your gaming. If someone doesn't like that, if one of your close family members, or if someone else doesn't like the fact that you play games and it just doesn't align with their values and what they want to get out of life, you have to accept that. There's literally no excuse here, because it's your decision. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it. So if you're going to play video games, own the consequences of playing video games, even if you think it's just casually. And don't gaslight other people when they don't feel like being a part of your life anymore, or interacting with you anymore, or if your values are just so different from theirs that they have to stop hanging out with you, because it's literally intoxicating to surround themselves with someone who is comfortable and content and doesn't want more out of life and doesn't want to live life like its own magical, adventure, like its own game. I think I touched on everything that I wanted to touch on. The last thing that I'll leave you with really is going back to an analogy that I made earlier in this video. You can live life in one of two ways, right? You can live life as an NPC, right? As someone, I'm sure you've heard this comparison before, but as someone in the Matrix, right? They're at the whim of programming that they don't question or change. They're not conscious of themselves as like a human being that has agency, right? They're kind of just going with the flow, going through the motions, at the mercy of forces out of their control. They're like an NPC. You can live like an NPC, or you can live like the main character of your own epic real life story as the protagonist of this game that we call life, and take full accountability of your power to affect change in the world, and to create your ideal reality should you choose to. It might not necessarily be as easy as playing video games, but that's life. And sure, it might not be fair. Some people are born into better circumstances. Some people, are born millionaires, whatever. You can sulk about that, or that's not going to get you anywhere is the thing, dude. Like, we've all been handed different cards in life. I'm not going to pretend that it's fair, but the universe, life isn't fair, and you can make the best of it, or you can run away from it and just sulk in a place of victimhood and not live your life to its fullest potential. Something much greater awaits you on the other side of playing video games. What if your life was so captivating and extraordinary and exciting that the same way that, like, for example, when I used to play World of Warcraft and I was super into what I was doing, I'd go to bed just thinking about what I was going to do the next day, and I'd fucking dream about it, and I'd wake up, immediately get back on my computer and jump back into it. I was so excited and drawn and hooked. Like, what if your life was like that? What if you didn't even feel the need to play a video game at all because it just took away from something much greater? If you're going to do anything after this video, even if you're still going to continue playing video games, the only thing I ask of you is to tap into your imagination. Quiet your life, put away the phone for a bit, and actually just sit with yourself and listen to what comes up. Tap back into that intuition and ask yourself, like, who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want out of life? What do I dream about? And then ask yourself whether or not, and it could be anything. It's not, for one person, it might be a millionaire businessman with the freedom to, travel the world and do all these things. For another person, it might just be, it might be being an artist, being a writer, being a philosopher. Like, it's up to you. I can't read your mind about what a good life truly means, right? But I'm sure that the common denominators for everyone is better health, better relationships, and better wealth, right? More money. And the freedom to actually live your life on your own terms. And if you're not there yet, ask yourself if it truly matters enough to you to actually go for it, and why you haven't made that jump yet. And moreover, more importantly, whether or not playing video games truly aligns with who you want to become and the type of ideal life that you want to create for yourself. Just practice using that imagination. This was totally off the cuff. I think I covered everything that I wanted to in this video. If you're going to interact with the video at all, leave a comment and let's start a conversation. But I'll make more of these in the future. Once we hit 1K subs, I'll do a live stream, which I think will be much better, so I can interact with your questions and your thoughts in real time. But thank you so much for being a part of this community. It is my mission to help 1 million men transcend video games and level up their real lives and turn their lives into an extraordinary, captivating game that they don't feel the need to escape from, that they can play all the time. And I think that'll be much more rewarding. So thanks for following, and I hope to see you soon.